Hi, my name is Kyle Kasi, and my presentation is entitled Growth Mindset in the Instrumental Music Classroom. Okay, so a quick introduction into what the growth mindset and fixed mindset are. They're basically just two different ways of looking at handling difficulty and accomplishing tasks. So the first way that people with growth mindset differ from people with a fixed mindset would be they differ in their perception of intelligence. So people with a growth mindset, or if you have a growth mindset for a particular task, it means that you feel like intelligence can be changed and molded over time based on practice and increased experience. You feel like you can get better at things. However, people with a fixed mindset view intelligence as something that is fixed at birth. So either you are good at something or you're not good at it, and there's not much that you can do in the way of practice or gaining experience to change that fact. You're either good at it or you're not. And because of these two differences in how they perceive intelligence, they also differ in how they respond to difficulty or failure. So someone with a growth mindset, when they experience difficulty or just flat out failure on a task, they will regroup. They'll use it as a learning opportunity and say, okay, what went wrong? How can I fix it? How can I do better next time? Those with a fixed mindset take failure or difficulty as an indication that they do not possess that sort of intelligence. So if it's, trying to master a musical instrument, at the first sign of difficulty, which is going to happen, they feel like, you know what, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. So there's a very big difference in how people with either mindset will respond to difficulty or, hardship or just flat out failure. So with the growth mindset, I analyzed the growth mindset in connection to five of the most cited and contemporary motivational theories in education today. And so that would be these theories that we see in front of us, first of which would be the self-determination theory. And there are three key points of the self-determination theory: relatedness, autonomy, and competence. Those are three things that students need, according to the self-determination theory, in order to foster intrinsic motivation. And so here, what is most closely related to growth mindset would be the aspect of competence that comes from the self-determination theory, basically stating that students need to experience success in some form or another in order to fuel that drive to continue participating in tasks. The expectancy value theory deals with both of those things. So expectancy, how well do I think I'm going to do on this task, and value, how important do I perceive completing this task to be to me? When students both consider a task to be important, meaning that they value it, and they figure that they have a pretty good chance of doing well on the task, that is when you get the most serious attempts. That is when students make their best efforts, when they feel like what they're doing is important and that they have a reasonable chance of succeeding if they, follow directions and, engage in practice and really work hard at it. With regards to the flow theory, the biggest connection here to growth mindset would be basically just balancing the skill level with the difficulty of the task. So the skill level, and this relates a lot to the expectancy value theory as well, and that students need to feel like they have a reasonable chance of succeeding. So if the skill level required for the task is, very, very high, and this is a novice at this task, and it's not going to match up. No matter what they do, it's not going to match up, and they're not going to experience that success. They're not going to be very intrinsically motivated to keep going. However, when the task difficulty and the skill level of the learner are more closely matched, then learners experience flow, and they get into the rhythm of things, and it is much easier for them to continue to make their best efforts at accomplishing their tasks. And attribution theory, our biggest connection to the growth mindset, would be the types of attributions they make. So attribution theory states that there are basically two domains in which learners make attributions of either their successes or their failures. So the first would be internal versus external. So I succeeded or I did not succeed. First, I have to decide whose fault is it? Is it my fault or did it come from other factors that are beyond my control? So that's internal versus external. Is there something I can do to change what happened, or did what happened occur because of other factors that I cannot control? And then you have the stable versus unstable attributions. So is that outcome likely to change? Is there something I can do to change it, meaning that it's unstable, or is it very stable and there's nothing I can do to change it? An easy example of that one would be trying to break down a brick wall with, no tools, just your body, just by running into a brick wall. That would be pretty, in terms of attributions there, that's pretty stable. All right. No matter what you do with your body, without tools, you're not going to get through that brick wall. Okay. And so here, ideally, we would want students, if they're adopting the growth mindset, we would want them to make internal unstable attributions, meaning that when they experience failure or difficulty, they, number one, feel that it came from within. So there is something that they can do, or at least they feel that there is something that they can do to change those results next time around. And we want it to be unstable as well. So we want it to be, again, we want it to be able to move. We want their actions to have a consequence on what happens. So internal unstable would be, well, I didn't practice enough, or I didn't do this just right. I can change it. I can tweak it. I can make it better next time. Internal stable attributions would be more like, it's my fault because I'm just not good at this, or it's my fault because I'm just not talented enough. They feel like they feel like there's nothing that they can do about what's going on inside of them. So ideally, we would want them making those internal unstable attributions. And last but not least, achievement goal theory. Achievement goal theory talks about setting mastery goals versus performance goals. And ideally, we would want them to set mastery goals. So mastery goals are setting goals that have to do with actually completing a task and being proficient at it. So you want to there's a checklist of things that is set forth either by the learner themselves or by their teacher. And they say, yes, if I can do all these things, then I will have it down. Whereas performance goals are really only focused on the outward appearance of having it down and not really mastering what it takes to be proficient at a skill. So a performance goal for an instrumental student would be, I want to do better than my peers. I want to sound better. I want it to look like I've got it all figured out. I want it to look easy when I do it. And that's a good mindset to have when it is a byproduct. Okay. So we don't want students to have those performance goals. We want them to have mastery goals, and then whatever success they experience in their community, be it at the school level or an even larger level, will be a byproduct of that. So ideally, we would like for those for our students to be setting mastery goals if they are truly going to embrace the growth mindset. So the purpose of my study was to answer two primary research questions. All right, so I'm examining the motivation and engagement of middle school instrumental music students. And I want to answer these two questions. So I want to answer the question of growth mindset. Does it have an effect on class participation? And does it have an effect on completion of performance assignments? So are students going to participate in class more? And are they going to actually complete more of their performance tasks if they are exposed to the growth mindset? Okay, so getting to my methodology, I had a total of 76 students from my band classes. So they're all middle school classes, it's specifically grades 6, 7, and 8 is what I mean when I say middle school from here on forward. I was pretty evenly split between my 6th and 7th grade. They were the larger groups, and my 8th grade group is a bit smaller. So I had roughly 40% 6th and 7th graders, and about 22% of my total sample were my 8th grade students. So the students were taught explicitly about growth mindset, meaning I did speak to them directly about it. I introduced it. We talked a bit about what it is, what is each mindset, how can you identify when you're using one or the other. We talked about how you can have more than one, so you can have different mindsets for different tasks. And we ended with a video presentation and a classroom discussion. After that, I gave a short growth mindset quiz as a manipulation check just to make sure that my students really understood what we had just talked about and the information that I had presented to them, and how the growth mindset could help them, not only in my class, so band class, but also with tackling other difficulties throughout school. The manipulation check was successful. Nearly all of my students got perfect scores on the little 7-question quiz that followed our class discussion. Then throughout the period of monitoring to make sure that the students were actually using growth mindset, we used a practice journal, which was collected every week, and it was a growth mindset aligned practice journal. So I had set it up in a way that if they were following all of the instructions on the practice journal, they would be using, or at least exposed to, that process of going through the growth mindset of identifying your problem, walking through what it would take to fix it, and setting new goals in order to reach that goal. A classroom observation chart was used to track my students' class participation throughout. So both before and after the treatment being our discussion and video of the growth mindset. So a class observation chart was used to track their class participation and to create a grading system of sorts for their levels of class participation. We will get to that on the very next slide. And finally, the number of completed performance assignments was used to gauge their performance assignment completion. So basically, percentages from before for each student were compared to percentages from after the treatment for each student. Here is the teacher observation form that I used in observing my students. So we can see the name here. We have receptive to instruction, which is graded on a scale of 1 to 4. There were no zeros here, so it was a scale of 1 to 4. And here were the questions that I used to answer or to calculate that score there. So 3 things, whether or not, and these are all just quick yes/no questions, so that I could accurately take these notes during or right after class for all of my students. So I asked, well, do they ask and answer questions in class? Do they play in class? And if they are virtual, because I was teaching this during a hybrid schedule where some of my students were in front of me and some were not, if they were virtual, were they using their camera, which I frequently ask them to use, and explain how much it helps to see what they're doing and be able to correct things. And then there's this last column over here for special notes. So, and that was for me so that I didn't unnecessarily ding students. So let's say that all 3 of these were no, they didn't answer questions, no, they didn't play in class, no, their camera wasn't on. One of my special notes were absences. So if I got no, I could see if they were just not there that day. And so I wouldn't penalize them for that. So my data analysis, all of these were used, all of my data were analyzed using paired sample t-tests. So I had all of my students were in my before and after treatment groups. So they served as their own controls. And that is why I used the dependent samples t-test. And so the pre and post participation ratings, which were calculated from our mean participation ratings. So pre and post mean participation ratings for all students. So this column here were calculated. And so those were what went into my t-tests and trying to see if there was a significant difference between before the treatment and after the treatment. And then for the class, the performance assignments, I took the percentage of completed performance assignments for each student from before the treatment compared to after the treatment, and that was the data that went into my paired samples t-test for that research question. So here are my results for class participation. So here we can see that there was a strong positive trend. So my mean participation ratings, and this is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So the mean participation ratings went up from a mean of 2.7 to a mean of 2.89. So very positive trend there, although we can see here in our chart for the bulk of my students, so my 6th and 8th graders, there were no significant differences in their class participation. 7th grade, there was a significant difference, and that was in the positive direction. So they had significantly more class participation after the treatment. Here are the results for the performance assignment completion. And that was on that same chart, but just we're looking at the other side now. Here we can see there were no significant differences for any of the grade levels. So that did not do a whole lot of good in the way of increasing performance assignment completion. And we can see here that for my 6th graders, I do not have data for them. That is due to an error on my part. I did not have sufficient data for the before period, so I didn't have enough performance assignments for them before our discussion on growth mindset. So in the future, I will definitely make sure to have enough data to include for all 3 grade levels. So my conclusion was that I found no evidence that explicit teaching of growth mindset increases class participation or performance assignment completion. There were positive trends for both, but again, not much statistical significance there. And so this does not align with most of the research that I've reviewed in this area. And here are my 3 biggest reasons why I think that may be so. Basically, these are some of the top weaknesses I feel like my study had. So I don't think I gave it enough time. So it may take more time for the growth mindset to really take effect. Again, my students, for the most part, all passed the manipulation check. So it was clear that they understood in the beginning. However, maybe it takes a bit more time for them to actually internalize that and start to really use the growth mindset in relation to performing tasks related to band. It also may take more frequent discussion in order to get them to internalize it. So we did have our class discussion where I introduced it and we watched a video, and that was a big chunk of class time. That was most of the class that day, and it may be necessary to do that even more. And it comes at the sacrifice of class time, but it should pay dividends in terms of students really internalizing this. Once they do internalize it, they should be much more motivated. So it may take more time, more actual class time to discuss it, to make sure students are really understanding. And it may just not be as effective in the virtual environment. Many of my students before the treatment, we were completely virtual. So that would be last semester. Then this semester we came back and we were hybrid. So that's, some of them came back into the building, but most of them were still virtual. And this just may not be, this method or these strategies just may not be as effective in the virtual environment. So that is another thing to keep in mind when comparing my results to most of the literature on this topic. And so now finally I have my implications. And so here are my closing suggestions for music teachers who want to incorporate the growth mindset into their classrooms, specifically instrumental music teachers. I would allot more than 7 weeks for the effects to emerge. So it may seem like, even day 1, they may pass the manipulation check with flying colors, and they may seem like they're doing very well with, using the practice journals that are aligned with the growth mindset. But I would still allot at least 3 full months to see if it's taken effect. Next, I would include periodic class discussions, and I would include in those discussions 2 very important things: how it's helping or not helping, and practice scenarios. So those were two things that I didn't really talk about once we got going. Once they were supposed to be using it, I could have been asking them, okay, is this helping you? Is it not helping you? And really let them share out, not really just to me, but to each other. And so they could hear how some of their classmates are grappling with these different difficulties, and how they're using growth mindset to help them. And also practice scenarios. So to give them a scenario in which they have experienced failure or experienced success and see how they react to it. And then as a class, we can discuss, okay, is that a growth mindset reaction? Is that going to be beneficial later on? I feel like these types of discussions, if they were included more, and periodic being the key word, so it's got to happen on a regular basis. I feel like that would go a long way towards making sure that they internalize exactly what the growth mindset is and how they can use it in a variety of different situations. And finally, we want to keep in mind that these strategies just may not be as effective in the virtual environment. So that could be a big part of why I only experienced statistical significance for one variable and one grade level. It was kind of a misnomer, not misnomer, kind of an outlier, and that I was hesitant to really consider it. I had to look back at my data and go, was that really significant there? Was that really the only one? So it may just not be as effective in the virtual environment, and that is something that we need to keep in mind. Not all strategies are created equal. Not all of them will apply to all populations or samples, and definitely not in all environments, all learning environments. So this has been my presentation on the growth mindset in the instrumental music classroom. Hope you enjoyed. Take care.